Hi everyone, welcome to the fifth episode of the GenAI CIO Podcast, where Shiva, the founder and CEO for Lizer, and Rishabh, founder and CBO for GoML, bring you the latest and the greatest in the GenAI space. I want to start with a very interesting update for this week's podcast. Well, obviously, Google has been in news for a lot of reasons, good and bad. With the Gemini release that came in a couple of weeks ago, they've now, or the DeepMind team within Google has now brought in a very interesting update where they published a paper revolutionizing the way the transformer models actually work. And one of the problems that we've seen with these models till date is that they've not been really good with solving mathematical problems, right? While they've been doing a lot of text-based problems, text conversions, NLP-based problems, with mathematical problems because they require you to come up with a particular answer has not been solved, right? So most of these models have given you solutions or way to solve, let's say, a 2 by 2 matrix multiplication. But if you go and ask any of these models to give you the answer, that answer might not be perfect. So what they've done is they've released something called as FunSearch as a approach to probably solve, and they've claimed that they've solved one of the biggest mathematical puzzle problems called CAPSET problem right through this approach. And this whole FunSearch is now built on Google Palm 2 model, right? But what have they done in this whole approach, right? So if I just get a little deeper into this, what they've done is, so there's an LLM or a foundation model that's actually sitting and behaving as it generally does, as any transformer model does. But
which is in this case Palm 2.
Exactly, sure. Right. But what they've actually done on top of it is they've developed an evaluator, right?
Okay.
So before like any kind of a response that the model can actually give, the evaluator actually evaluates the whole response, right? And then probably gives the final output, right? So it's more of an iterative process. But that's something that, we've always done, right? Then what's new with this model, right?
Yeah.
So at least what they claim is that they've built a set of programs, right, and they've inputted that into the Palm 2 model, right? Now, dynamically, Palm 2 model, based on the mathematical puzzle or the problem that's given, it dynamically selects the program, right, gives the output, which is then evaluated by this evaluator. And based on the feedback, right, it then probably learns. So the next time probably connects, it selects the better program, right, dynamically, right? So that's the whole flow that they've developed, right?
But why does it then sound like they kind of engineered this to solve this particular problem? I mean, how would you give all the credit to whatever the FunSearch model is?
So yeah, exactly, right. So this is not something that DeepMind has solved on its own, right? So there is a mathematician, if I'm getting the name, Jordan Allen, right, who was involved in this whole experiment, and he's a very well-known mathematician, right? But then I was going through this paper by Ernest Davis, Shiva, right, where what he has clearly highlighted exactly what you just mentioned, right? He has clearly highlighted is what they've done right now is the evaluator code that they're claiming to is primarily a code that has been written to solve a particular problem. And if you actually look at the claim also that they made in the paper, right, the CAPSET problem, which primarily is a very well-known mathematical problem, which is in a three-dimensional space. You look at 3 points which do not lie on a single line, right?
Correct.
And one of the reasons why this is still considered to be a big problem to solve, because it cannot be solved by a brute force method, because the number of possibilities are bigger than the number of atoms in the universe, right? And they've used this particular algorithm to probably solve a problem to probably have like your data centers optimization, right? So what he has claimed very well in his paper is that this evaluator is primarily a particular code that they've written to solve a particular problem, right?
Exactly.
It's an actual FM that works or transformer that works on a transformer model principles, but then that code comes and this evaluator primarily builds or solves that or gives you the response for this problem in short.
Exactly, like what we do in the enterprise space, right? We take an base LLM, fine tune it, get it ready. Then you write a bunch of functions and programs on top, and all of this kind of interact with each other to form an agent. So basically, FunSearch is an agent. Yeah. Just that the DeepMind team has taken a lot of effort to solve this particular problem. I mean, it's still a fantastic feat. I mean, if you want to rank this agent among all the other agents that companies like GoML and Lizer and even take some big names build, obviously this is right on top. But eventually, for me, it is still an agent. I mean, this whole race to solving mathematical problems is when the Q star, we've been discussing about Q star like last a month back, right? Where it can now Q star is showing potential or has the capability to solve mathematical problems. There is a race towards it because understandably, if you solve math, since that fact that you're already solving language, and now if you can solve math, you are kind of closer to AGI. So, yeah, like I said, I mean, like what you mentioned, FunSearch, we cannot take this. We have to take this results with a pinch of salt. It's right. That's what you're trying to say. It's not that.
It's Yeah, I mean,
It's
with how Google has been staging demos and
yeah.
papers, it's catching up in the race. But absolutely right, Shiva. It's a good update. But again, I mean, the claim that we are solving mathematical problems or AGI, I don't think so. We are anywhere near with this paper, but it's a good
No,
update.
a high time Google get their act right. I don't know if you saw the news yesterday. An independent evaluation has highlighted that Google's Pro, which is current Bard model, is performing poorer than GPT 3.5. 3.5, imagine, right? Ideally, Google Pro was equivalent to 3.5, and Google Ultra was
Better than
good or better than GPT-4 as per the results that they published. But when independent evaluations have started trickling in, and it's already showing that it's not doing that well from a reasoning standpoint
so.
compared to 3.5. So
And I was reading this thread on Reddit, Shiva, that and I think we spoke about this last time that 4.5 it was more of a hoax, right? That OpenAI dropped hints, and
yeah,
lately they've dropped hints for 5 as well, right? So maybe Google had to rush into releasing Gemini, and it all now falls in line, right? If you remember, just a week before there was an announcement that due to multilingual capabilities not working, they will be pushing Gemini to next year. But this week after that, they released it, right? So probably they rushed into it. But having said that, the Ultra model is still not available. It will be available in 2024 only. That's when you'll be able to test the
yeah.
actual
Now,
capabilities.
apparently,
But
yeah, apparently Sergey Brin has been behind this to push
yes,
and get it out ASAP. See, Google is under a lot of pressure. Let's take it. Let's understand that Google's customers are already moving to OpenAI and Azure. Azure have both their arms up, I mean, open for Google customers to come on board. AWS, on the other hand, is I would say AWS is a default for Google customers because if you want to, when we've done in the past, right, Rishabh, in our cloud days, migrating from Google and AWS is a lot easier compared to migrating from Google to Azure.
okay, yeah.
So AWS kind of becomes a default choice. You can move all your workloads to AWS and then integrate with OpenAI or Cloud or Bedrock. So Google is under a lot of pressure, and I'm just seeing that. I mean, I don't know. For a big company, they're probably just buckling under the pressure. Actually,
Exactly. Like each of these hyperscalers have their own, probably if I look at Azure, obviously they came into the game much faster with OpenAI. AWS, although did not focus on creating their own model, but now they've given you at least a managed platform to, and it runs beautifully. Applications run well. We've done deployments on
and
Bedrock.
exactly,
That's where
yeah.
Google is lagging, right? None of their models have really successfully been implemented, or at least in our experience, we've not seen a lot of production workloads going on to either Palm or Bart or
Yeah.
Gemini now, right? So yeah, so that absolutely right,
and
Shiva.
and Anthropic's new fundraise, taking Anthropic to what 18 billion valuation,
Yes.
is gonna anyway. I mean, they're making it very clear that hey, we are here for the long run. So AWS is pretty secure that way as well on the Amazon Bedrock. So Google, I think the message is loud and clear. Even from our podcast, please get your act right. We want to work with your models. Please get them out.
All right.
Okay.
Let's move on to
Next
what's
one.
Meta up to.
Eh, Yeah, interesting. I never thought Meta will do this. I mean, I thought they'll continue to, I mean, launch these open source platforms like Llama and Code Llama, and continue to cause pain to GPTs and Anthropics of the world. But this is a very surprising thing. Meta has launched a project. It's a project called Purple Llama, and the idea here is to uh, as under the Purple Llama project, Meta will launch a set of tools focused towards AI security, right? The cybersecurity aspect. Okay, how can you evaluate cybersecurity? How can you evaluate safetiness of the model? How can you evaluate guardrails that you set up in the model? How can you How can you evaluate the responsibleness of the model? So that's what Meta is really focusing here. So Purple Llama, exciting. I think they've already teamed up with IBM and few other enterprise companies. It's a massive push for Meta back into the enterprise game. We all know Meta tried the workspace. I think workspace is what it's called, the Facebook workspace.
Yeah.
It's right.
Collaboration
Yeah,
one, right?
collaboration thing like Yammer types they launched,
Yeah. His notebooks.
which could have been a big Slack thing, but
It did
it didn't
not.
work.
Yeah, I
It did
think
not.
we tried in the previous organization.
We tried as well, yeah. But this might bring Meta back into the workspace. They have a fantastic AI scientist, Lee Kun, and I think this is just going to be probably 2024 might be a big year for Meta looking forward, actually.
Absolutely. I think it's a brilliant development. One obviously is because Meta, as you rightly mentioned, right, this will bring them into the enterprise space at least. Back into the enterprise space, sorry. But this also puts a lot of these open source models, right? I think Llama has more than 100 million plus downloads, right? If I'm not, or more than that, right?
You're
If
right,
not
yeah.
less. Now, this puts the whole open source models back into into the same space that probably the GPT enterprises of the world would come in, right? That they're now claiming I'm going to give you an enterprise ready model, but this is still open source, right? You still have access to, you still know how your code or how your data is handled and so on and so forth, right? I think they've also released a Llama Guard, I think which is still open source and which probably at least claims that you'll have lesser hallucinated or lesser incorrect outputs from the model, but it's still open source, right? So I think that's another good update about them, right? Shiva.
Nice. Meta, way to go, Meta. I mean, we saw how Google is faltering and we see how Meta is like moving forward. Fantastic. Okay,
We've
what's
implemented a
next?
lot of use cases on Llama too, Shiva,
Yeah.
and while obviously the accuracy when you compare with GPT-4 definitely lags, especially in
Yeah.
NLP type of use cases.
Yeah.
But at least from implementation perspective, the flexibility is pretty good, and now it being available on Bedrock is definitely a
Look, I mean, see, what is really important is they kickstarted this whole open LLM movement, right? Then Mistral came, and Mistral is fantastic now. Probably the best open source model is Mistral 8 into 7B, which shows that, I mean, Llama 7B was a benchmark. Llama 70B became a benchmark. Mistral 7B became a benchmark. Now Mistral 8 model of
yeah.
experts 7B has become a benchmark. The, what it shows is 2024 is going to be just they will take this game further and further and further up, where more and more open source LLMs are going to come just taking the benchmark up and up and up. So yeah, I mean, a lot of credit to Meta for doing
But
that.
what worries me, Shiva, over here, and I think I had highlighted this in one of our previous podcasts as well, is like what's happening over here is a standard thing that happened with the research industry, right? So the number of papers in the last 10 years that have been published have gone up exponentially, but the groundbreaking research that has happened has gone down significantly, right? Now one of the reasons obviously is for this the measure, and I think I highlighted this again, the good hearts rule, right? Like when the measure becomes your target, it ceases to become a good measure. What worries me over here is that this race, right? So everyone wants to launch their own model with bigger parameters, better context windows. Will it lead us in the right direction, or will we just focus on some of these measures rather
Yeah,
than probably reaching the right target? But yeah, obviously
yeah.
something to be seen as
I
you move
mean,
forward.
the recent podcast of Lex Friedman and Jeff Bezos, it's a gem of a podcast where Jeff clearly says this, like what he said. We all, to measure customer success, we all brought in the concept called KPIs. Then we all started running behind KPIs and we totally forgot what customer success is
Exactly.
because we show, hey, KPIs are fantastic, but that doesn't mean that your customer is happy, your customer is going to come back, your customer has high, what to say, value for your brand. So yeah, I think what you're saying is similar thing, right? So a lot of research papers are coming out, but doesn't mean that it's actually meaning anything or adding any value to things. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I want to continue to be an AI optimist. So I hope that things get better as more and more open source platforms come out. Hugging Face, again, kudos to Hugging Face. Fantastic job in keeping the open, I would say, source machine learning and now LLM market up and running. What next?
Great. So, an interesting update again. How do we utilize this in our enterprise space? Will be to say. But one thing that all of us have seen mostly in science fiction is that your computers mimicking human brain, and I think
Mm-hmm.
this was something that Shiva, we were discussing in our previous podcast. One of the reasons why I still feel AGI is quite down the lane is because we ourselves don't understand how human brains work.
Yeah.
We keep
Yeah.
making those discoveries. But now, this university, Western Sydney University in Australia, has come up with something called as DeepSouth, right?
Mm.
But what they've actually done as part of this DeepSouth is they've created a set of networks that mimic how our brains work, how our neurons work, right? But that has been attended in the past as well, like we've created such structures who have been able to at least interact in the way that our brains work or neurons actually work, right? But what they've actually done is they've created a set of neuromorphic systems that are able to simulate close to 200 plus trillion synaptic connections between these neurons, and these neurons act as networks, right? They're not like just points; they act as networks, right? Like our brains. Now the advantage, or probably the breakthrough in this, is that this is almost similar to the activity that our brain is able to achieve at a point of time, which is close to 230 trillion synaptic
Got it.
signals sent out at a time, right? So they've been able to reach that level. So now there's a level playing ground where probably the brains are working at the same operational efficiency while your computers are working at the same operational efficiency. And as I highlighted, what they've also, another difference about what they've launched is from the previous experiments, is that these are networks, right? These neurons are acting as networks, right? So again, the simulation of each network happens, and at a node level. So not all networks are simulated in one go, as our brain works, right? So it requires a lot less power to run as well, like lot less power, lot less cost. So it's viable now, right? Where the earlier systems would probably simulate everything in one go, so it required a lot of power to run these systems. So these are the two changes that they've been able to bring in. So interesting
So
update to look out.
basically, what you're saying is architecturally it's made possible. IBM is involved, I could see here, but function wise, outcome wise, we'll have to wait and see
We'll
how
have to
this
wait and
turns out.
exactly. So they've
Got it.
simulated it, right? Now, what's the outcome is something that we'll have to wait
Got
and
it.
see.
Cool. So next up, I think this is going to be a quick update. Azure has launched GPT-RAG. So ever since OpenAI launched the GPT builder, wherein you can build RAG quickly, I think that's when RAG really got to more and more users actually. Uh, Before GPT RAG was launched, we all know about RAG. I mean, enterprise space at least knew about RAG, but I mean, other tech customers, consumers were not kind of exposed to it. One of the open source providers like Llama Index have been fantastic in getting the RAG techniques out to the market. But then OpenAI's GPT Builder really changed the whole thing. Everyone now understands what RAG is. Most of them understands what RAG is, I would say. And Azure and then enterprise automatically started wanting it because they really know that they really understood that RAG gives context. So for people who are listening to the podcast, RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And with this, you can actually give context and some bit of memory to your LLM or your bot or chatbot, whatever that you use, because otherwise LLM calls are stateless. So RAG. So now enterprises are wanting RAG, and GPT now Azure launches has launched this RAG as a Azure service, and now anyone running on Azure can build their own context-aware LLM application with the help of Azure RAG. Even at Liza, we've launched a state-of-the-art RAG bot where close to 27 parameters have been considered, which customers could fine tune or change in order to get the performance that they need. Probably the best in the industry, I would say, at this point in time, because no one has done it with 27 parameters. And that's how complex it actually gets. But again, kudos to Azure to listen to customers, to listen to the pulse and get it out where Google has been faltering. And even AWS didn't get a RAG service out yet. So that's really surprising because RAG literally seems to be the way forward. So yeah, again, fantastic. Uh,
So this is
Azure is
where
definitely winning the race.
no, absolutely. See, this is where Azure is getting things right, right? And I think in one of the previous podcasts we were discussing that how well Azure has had its set of failures in terms of new technologies. Microsoft Tay is a very good example, right? What happened, the notes maker that was launched in the Windows, right, which was just a it irritated people, right, for Microsoft PowerPoints and whatnot, right? So this time, what they've really done is they've gotten their act right, is where they've left the model innovation to OpenAI, right? For them to probably build the base model, and uh, what they are now concentrating or focusing heavily on is how do they make it more consumable. So they've taken the GTM part on themselves, whereas now they're not like the OpenAI is building that base for them. But I think that's a good strategy that they've adopted, similar to what AWS is also attempting now. But you're right, right? I think from the innovation perspective, Azure has taken a as a flag
Yeah, I
bearer.
mean, exactly. It's a service. GPT, I mean, RAG is a service. Similar to how we at Lizer we have a RAG bot, which is an SDK, which just does that. Or if you want open source, you go to Llama Index, where they give you a vector store index function, which is a met module that you can call. So yeah, fantastic update again from Azure. What next? Oh yeah, another one. Interesting one. Uh, so Chevrolet, which is a very popular car manufacturer in the US, launched a chatbot in their car dealer website, and which is powered by ChatGPT. And when the news got out in Reddit and other places, people started doing prompt injections. So prompt injections, for people who are probably listening, I mean, hearing to this term for the first time, prompt injection is nothing but ask series of questions and continue to push the chatbot model to a point where it breaks, where it literally breaks, it loses context, it loses memory, and it starts bringing out responses which it's not supposed to, which is it goes out of the guardrails that we set. And having built so many models so far, we can tell you that there are only 2 or 3 ways to set up guardrails today. One is by fine tuning the LLM in the backend. Number two is by passing the right data through RAG. Number three is at a prompt level, give instructions that, hey GPT, don't do this, hey GPT, don't do that. This is pretty much what you could do today. I mean, that's how the language models are, and that's what even Greg Brockman says. Prompt is all you need. So, so now that people knew this, and I don't think they have sophisticated fine-tuned model in the backend. I don't think they have a lot of RAG level things, and even their prompt, I would say, guardrails could be much weaker probably. So people started doing prompt injection, started sending the bot in circle. They managed to get cars listed at $1 through the bot, right, for $1, right? That's the most thing. I mean, they managed to get the bot say that, yeah, you can buy a Chevy for $1 now. So so yeah, this is
So
something
this
that
is
enterprises should think about, which is it is you cannot just adopt just like that. There has to be these. I mean, try the proven method. Speak to people like us who've been working with enterprise for so many months and so many years now in our previous avatars as well. And this is a classic example of why enterprises should think about the full stack, starting from your LLM, then RAG, then prompt, then other outside of LLMs have some evaluation agents as well before you actually get the bot out. So over to you,
absolutely,
Rick.
Shiva. You put it very rightly, and I think we get these questions left, right, center from our customers. Right? I have GPT. I can just use it out of the box. Right? Why do I probably need to build these guardrails, etc. Right? The guardrails are not for one. Obviously, Shiva, you've really highlighted that you need to protect, right, your systems against hallucination, wrong, incorrect outputs, accessing incorrect data, and whatnot. But I think, and you were speaking about RAG, which is just a wonderful way to probably build domain specific use cases. So there are a lot of, like, what we always tell our customers is that these models are the base, right? On which you still need to build your guardrails, you need to build context, and that's when you actually get a domain-specific use case, right? So you've already put it. I'm not going to dive deeper into it, but that's a question that we get a lot, and that's probably the brilliant response you've actually given.
Yeah. Next up, ISO 42001. Go ahead, Rishabh.
So I think it's been long now that while there are a lot of Europe launched their own regulatory framework, regulatory set of rules to probably, and they've actually been a harbinger since the time in terms of how technology is managed. But I think it's a high time that we the world saw kind of a standard as well, that a lot of these vendors and companies that are actually working on across tell them. So it's good to see that now we have the ISO 42001, which is actually an international standard, primarily which specifies the requirements, what are required to implement these large language models systems, primarily something which we are actually referring to as artificial intelligence management systems, right, or AIMS, right, specifically within organizations or commercially viable systems, right? Well, obviously, it states a lot of the verbiage around trust, data, etc., which obviously is required. But I think the biggest thing to probably note over here is it has heavily focused on the ethical use of these models, right? How these models, or probably the content generated across these models, who owns the copyrights, right? I think that's one of the biggest problems with the generation models that has come in, right? So I think that's the best thing to note. More and more commercially viable systems come into picture. We need some more regulation, but it's a good start, or the start in the right direction.
As we were speaking, I just asked Perplexity if Azure and Google Cloud, do they have this certification? Actually, no. So full marks to AWS in actively working on this since 2021. They've been working on this since
Yeah.
2021, and they are the only cloud platform that supports 42001. It doesn't mean anything, to be honest, yet, because
Yeah.
I don't think enterprises are going to put this in their RFPs saying, hey, you should be an ISO 4201 I would say compliance company yet, but it's not going to be far. I mean, AWS has a fantastic marketing tool with them now, saying that, hey, we are an ISO standard AI platform provider. So yeah, full marks to dude. I think AWS and Azure are really, really, really moving. They're thinking right. They're moving forward. They are for enterprise.
And the
Lot
strategy
of
is
respect.
completely different, right, Shiva? Like, it's not like both of them are taking the same strategy, right? So where, and you rightly mentioned, AWS is building a platform, and that's what they've mastered since the time, right? They're building a platform on which you can build your own custom,
Exactly.
applications. They're giving you that platform. Azure is doing it, killing it, because they already had a new entry. They're killing it from the GTM perspective, right? They know they have the best model in place today, right? But they're killing it from the GTM perspective. So the strategies are completely different, but still both of them are making news.
Yeah, I think at least we are thinking right. I mean, with the new industry LLM focus that GoML is going to get into, and the builder focus, the solution focus that we have at Lizer, the SDK focus, full stack SDK focus. I think probably Google could invest in us, and we can help Google cover the third pie which they've been missing. Actually, I mean, like you said, because AWS is clearly taking a path, like you said, and Azure is taking a path. Google has a path ahead of them. They have fantastic products with them. Hope Google turns things around in 2024. Who knows?
I
It could
hope
be a massive year for Google in 2024.
I hope Sundar Pichai is listening to this podcast, Shiva. But that
We're not that famous yet, so hopefully some.
we'll get there, Shiva. We'll get there. All right, great. So I think that brings us, to the next harbinger of technology, right? And I was, Apple. If I wasn't clear, but I was just reading that Apple, which has been like the master, or probably the leader in the whole market capitalization perspective.
Smartphone, yeah.
I mean, smartphones is something that they started off with, right? But probably they'll now, in a couple of months, Microsoft is going to take over, right? But I do always feel that they are, still bearing the fruit of Steve Jobs and his innovation, right? Which to certain extent has slowed down in the company, but generative AI is something that they've really taken a back foot on. While earlier this year they made a lot of announcements that they're working on their own Apple GPT and whatnot. But I think now what they've done is they've come up with a very good update. Although how it works, we'll have to see, right? But they've actually made it capable, at least on the iPhones, Apple iPhone devices, for large language models, because the biggest problem with these edge models is the memory, right? How will, if a model is actually running on these edge devices, how do they, because these are very memory intensive functions, right? How do they probably run? So what they've done is they've leveraged the flash memory that's used by these phones, like these devices, right, to run the model parameters. So in short, what they're trying to do now is that these large language models, right, will be able to run on these devices to a certain extent and give the right output real time, right, to users by leveraging some of these, by leveraging the flash memory, even with a low dynamic RAM availability. It's a good update because it opens up a lot of doors for now companies to probably, because iPhone probably still is a market leader in North America, right?
But
From
it's
the
still a
whole
hearsay. But it's still a hearsay. My only problem is still a
exactly.
hearsay. So we'll have to wait and see what. I mean, Apple might just do this for their stock prices because there's a lot of pressure on Apple that, hey, what are you guys doing? You are the tech giants in the devices space.
So one thing, Shiva, which I feel probably this could be, and the same thing that Google is trying, right, with Gemini, which is giving it as part of their edge devices the nano
Nano.
version.
Nano. Hmm.
Now, what I feel probably Apple can also leverage this now is by improving or probably integrating this with Siri. I'm not a big fan of Siri in today's version. I don't use it. I'm an iPhone user, but they have a good distribution channel with them, right?
Yeah.
So I
Siri
agree with you. Yes,
only if Siri was powered by Whisper API and GPT in the backend, Siri would be fantastic, right?
absolutely.
I was
Absolutely.
watching this podcast yesterday of Jason, where he interviewed Avi, who is building this tab device, wearable device, and if it, I mean the example best use case, right? Like Siri, it'll continue to listen to what you say, but with GPT back powered in the backend, and it summarizes, it takes notes, it keeps memory. So next time when I think about something, it'll tell me actually, you know what, you spoke about this few days back. So Siri has a massive potential. Today I use Siri only for reminders, nothing else, unset alarm. Apple has something, but I also it's a bit fishy that as soon as Google mentioned that their Pixel 8 phones will be having Nano, now Apple is kind of sharing this news out in the market. So I don't know, it's a bit slightly fishy because Pixel has emerged as a massive competitor to Apple anyway, right? Pixel went after that really. That strategy, Google really got it. You know what? I should not go after Samsung. I should not go after Nokia's of the world. I should go after Apple iPhone, which they got it right. Yeah, it's good.
Now, Google has gotten a
Let's
lot
see.
of, like I was discussing, right, that the open source strategy is something that Google brought in with Android, right?
Yeah, yeah,
How they captured the market, right? So absolutely, but I still feel it's a good update, Shiva. But again, as you mentioned, we'll have to see how this works out, right?
yeah.
Okay, moving on. Zoho has been making a lot of news since the launch of the transformer, or since the transformer models being commercialized across, right? So they
Hmm.
also launched something called as Zia, if I'm getting the name right, which is kind of their enterprise chatbot that actually helps you navigate across their suite of offerings. They also announced that they're working on their own GPT
Hmm.
earlier mid of this year. They also did close to 13, again, close to 13 plus AI integrations, at least that's what they've claimed in their suite of products again, right? But I think what, and I was going to this interview with Sridhar Vendu, right, is what he is, and this is something to what you were also mentioning, Jiva, is what they're focusing on is small language models, right?
Hmm.
Which is more consumable and solving very specific domain problems, right? They're not focusing on building, 200 billion parameters. They're focusing mostly on models that probably would be around 20 billion parameters. But
Not even then.
that,
Not even lower. Right? 7 billion is what they say. But we saw about the Microsoft 5.2 model that came out.
right.
2.7 billion parameter doing its job really well. I think
And
2024 another big place to watch, which is the small
absolutely.
language models.
Absolutely. And Phi 2 was trained only on textbook data. So the output also for specific use cases is pretty good. So something similar what Zoho is also aiming, but they made it very clear that they're going to work only on small language models and not targeting large language models, right? So yeah, so more and more on consumability, good updates, sure.
The last update for this podcast, there is an app called GPT-Engineer, which is actually an open source project that was launched a year back, had massive following. I think tens and thousands of GitHub stars. Now the team has they raised funding, and I've seen this live, right? I've seen this several times. The moment you cross the 2-3,000 mark GitHub stars within like a week or something, investors start writing to you. I've seen that happen to the OpenInterpreter.com guy. GPT Engineer also similar. So they raised funding. They built an app now, GPT Engineer app. In fact, I have an onboarding call with them in about 30 minutes. I'm really excited to see what it does. With simple prompts, you can build wholesome applications, front-end applications, which you can host. So that's what GPT Engineer does. Why? What is the enterprise connection here? The connection here is that hey, all the SIs, big GSIs, Accentures of the world, TCS, Wipros of the world, we all have provide this. We all have these developers. We used to work at LTI as well, so we all provide these developers. But you know what? With apps like this space is going to get robbed or moved out completely because you won't require your low level engineers anymore. You will require really high level engineers, right? And we are still in 2023, by the way. This is 2023 December. This is a year of OpenAI GPT launch, and we are already here with the GPT Engineer application. What would happen in 2024? What would December 2025 look like? That's and this really is exciting, and is also a message for all the developers. Hey, you know what? Skill up, level up, because app is going to do all of these simpler things. You will have to do much more complex things.
Absolutely.
And imagine in large companies, product managers and project managers can build their own micro apps without need for a developer actually. So I'm really excited. I'm going to do this demo call today with them. I'm going to come. I'll share more details on how it goes. And if I get access, I'll probably even share a demo video. But really excited to see this.
Absolutely, Shiva. On that note, 2024, maybe I'm interacting with Shiva's persona, right, on this podcast, and Shiva is probably doing an independent podcast on this with Zishab's persona. So, yeah, the world is open to opportunities. But absolutely, great updates. Thanks, Shiva, and thanks everyone for tuning in. With that, wishing everyone a very Merry Christmas. We'll be back. Shiva and I still will do the next week's podcast.
We will. We will. 54 weeks, 1 year commitment minimum.
Absolutely.
We'll do it.
So absolutely great. Thanks, Shiva, and thanks everyone for joining in. We'll again meet next week.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.